Imagine a landscape so vast and unforgiving that it swallows the horizon whole. Now, imagine a nation deciding to draw a line in the sand, not with ink, but with thousands of miles of steel, wire, and sheer human will. This isn't a wall built to repel an invading army or to define a political border. No, this is something far more surreal. Across the sun-scorched heart of the Australian outback, there exists a network of barriers so massive they can be seen from space. For over a century, hundreds of laborers have toiled in the dust to maintain these fences, often in temperatures exceeding 110 degrees Fahrenheit. When the project first began, the rest of the world looked on with a mix of confusion and mockery. Critics called it a monument of utility and a staggering waste of taxpayer dollars. But as the years turned into decades, these wire lifelines did something no one expected. They reshaped the biology of an entire continent. To understand why a country would spend millions of dollars every year to maintain the world's longest fences, we have to travel back to a single, fateful afternoon in 1859. Our story begins with a man named Thomas Austin. Austin was a wealthy British settler who had established a massive estate in Victoria, Australia. Like many colonists of his time, he felt a deep sense of homesickness for the English countryside. He missed the rolling hills, and specifically the traditional sport of rabbit hunting. On Christmas Day in 1859, Austin released 24 European rabbits onto his property. At the time, he famously remarked, "The introduction of a few rabbits could do little harm and might provide a touch of home in addition to a spot of hunting." It was perhaps the most understated disaster in the history of ecology. You see, the Australian environment was a biological vacuum for the rabbit. With no natural predators like foxes or weasels to keep them in check, and a climate that allowed for year-round breeding, the population didn't just grow, it exploded. A single female rabbit can produce up to 30 to 40 offspring in a single year. Do the math, and the results are terrifying. Within just 10 years, those 24 rabbits had multiplied into a swarm of over 200 million. By the 1880s, the Gray Plague was moving north at a rate of 80 miles per year, stripping the land of every blade of grass, toppling the livestock industry, and turning fertile plains into dust bowls. The government was staring down the barrel of total economic collapse. They tried everything: traps, poisons, and even introducing foxes, which only made things worse because the foxes started eating the native birds instead of the rabbits. Desperate times called for desperate measures, and so the era of the Great Fences began. In 1901, the government of Western Australia commissioned the construction of the rabbit-proof fence. This wasn't just a fence, it was a military-grade fortification stretching over 1,139 miles. To put that in perspective for my American listeners, that is roughly the distance from New York City to the southern tip of Florida. The logistics were a nightmare. Because there were no roads, laborers had to haul thousands of tons of wire and timber using massive camel trains. These Afghan cameleers became the unsung heroes of the outback, navigating the desert heat to deliver supplies to workers who were often hundreds of miles from the nearest civilization. The fence was divided into 3 sections: fence number 1, number 2, and number 3. It was a staggering achievement of engineering, but nature is a persistent adversary. Rabbits learned to burrow under the wire, and during the frequent willy-willies, the local name for dust storms, sand would pile up against the fence, creating natural ramps that the rabbits simply hopped over. Despite these setbacks, the fence provided a vital buffer. It cost the equivalent of $10 million in today's money to build, but it saved the multi-billion-dollar wheat industry from total annihilation. For a moment, it seemed like man had finally gained the upper hand. But, as any biologist will tell you, when you solve one problem in nature, you usually create 3 more. As the rabbit crisis began to stabilize, a more dangerous predator emerged from the shadows of the scrubland: the dingo. The dingo is Australia's apex land predator, a lean, intelligent wild dog that had been on the continent for thousands of years.
While they played a crucial role in the ecosystem, they were a nightmare for the burgeoning sheep industry. A single dingo in a paddock won't just kill one sheep for food, it will often go into a killing frenzy, slaughtering dozens of sheep in a single night. By the early 20th century, sheep farmers were losing 20 to 30% of their flocks annually. The solution? Take the lessons learned from the rabbit fences and scale them up to a level never seen before. They began constructing the Great Dingo Fence, also known as the Wild Dog Barrier Fence. Completed in the 1950s, this monstrosity stretches for a mind-boggling 3,488 miles. That is nearly double the length of the entire border between the United States and Mexico. It is quite literally one of the longest man-made structures on the planet. But here is where the story takes a dark psychological turn. The Dingo Fence didn't just protect sheep, it effectively sliced the continent in half, creating two different worlds. To the north and west of the fence, the dingo is king. The ecosystem there is wild and balanced. However, to the south and east, inside the protected zone, the dingo was systematically eradicated. This led to a phenomenon scientists call a trophic cascade. Without dingoes to hunt them, the populations of kangaroos and invasive red foxes exploded. The kangaroos ate all the grass, leaving nothing for the sheep, and the foxes wiped out nearly 30 species of small native mammals that are now extinct. Today, if you stand at the fence line, the difference is jarring. On the dingo-free side, the soil is often compacted and the vegetation is sparse. On the wild side, the land is more resilient. The fence has become a physical manifestation of our struggle to control the uncontrollable. Maintenance is a never-ending battle. Boundary riders spend their entire lives patrolling sections of the fence, repairing holes caused by camels, kangaroos, and even rust. A single gap, just 50 or 60 feet wide, can result in over $100 million in livestock losses if predators slip through. In fact, a recent breach that went unnoticed for 2 years in South Australia cost the local economy millions and required a $25 million emergency repair. It's a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, or rather, dog and wire, that never ends. While the government was fixated on four-legged invaders, they were completely blindsided by a threat from the sky, the emu. In 1932, Australia was gripped by the Great Depression and a devastating drought. Over 20,000 emus, driven by a desperate search for water and food, migrated from the interior toward the wheat farms of Western Australia. These aren't just birds, they're 130-pound flightless giants that can run at 30 miles per hour. They didn't just eat the crops, they used their massive strength to tear holes in the expensive rabbit-proof fences, allowing the rabbits to flood back into the fields. The farmers, many of whom were World War I veterans, were furious. They petitioned the government for military assistance. In one of the most bizarre chapters in military history, the Australian Minister of Defence actually deployed the army. This became known as the Great Emu War. Major G.P.W. Meredith of the 7th Heavy Battery of the Royal Australian Artillery led a troop of soldiers armed with 2 Lewis machine guns and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. The army expected an easy victory. They were wrong. The emus proved to be incredible guerrilla fighters. They moved in small, decentralized groups, making them impossible to target. Their thick feathers acted like natural body armor, and even when struck by multiple bullets, the birds often kept running. Major Meredith later remarked, "If we had a military division with the bullet-carrying capacity of these birds, it would face any army in the world." After weeks of wasted ammunition and broken-down trucks, the army surrendered. The emus had won. Today, the siege continues with new players. Feral cats, descendants of house pets, now roam nearly 99% of the continent. They're incredibly efficient killing machines, responsible for the deaths of an estimated 1 million birds and 2 million reptiles every single day. Then there is the cane toad, a toxic, invasive species introduced in 1935 to eat beetles. Instead, they became an unstoppable poisonous wave, killing crocodiles, snakes, and any native predator that tried to eat them. And what is Australia's response to these modern plagues? You guessed it, more fences. They're currently building massive cat-proof enclosures to create islands of safety for endangered species. If you were to lay every barrier built in Australia end to end, they would stretch for over 15,000 miles. That is enough wire to wrap more than halfway around the entire Earth.
This brings us to a profound realization. When we look at these fences, we see more than just steel and wood. We see a monument to human intervention. We tried to fix nature by bringing a piece of England to the desert, and we spent the next 150 years trying to wall off the consequences. We've built a world where we are, in a sense, the ones imprisoned. We stay inside the fences while the wild world, rabbits, dingoes, emus, and toads, continues to challenge our boundaries. So, I ask you, is the solution to keep building higher and longer? Or is it time to admit that we cannot conquer the wild, but must learn to live within its balance? The fences of Australia are a warning and a wonder, a testament to what happens when we try to draw a line that nature never intended to exist. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Should the fences stay, or is it time for the outback to go wild again? Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.